So for those of just joining, my name is Sacha Dawes. We are at Tech Field Day 20 today and talking to you about visual root cause analysis of pictures worth 1,000 words. As I mentioned, I'm going to use our Orion platform as a baseline to kind of show some of the improvements that we've actually incorporated from a visualization and show how they can be used to help with troubleshooting and understanding what's going on in the environment. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is AppStack. So actually I'm going to go back into my main dashboard. So this is the Orion platform. And just for anyone who's not overly familiar with it, well, it's our online demo and it kicked me out. And we're back in. So the Orion platform, it is a platform, and the kind of visualizations that I'm going to show you today is all part of that platform. And the value of the data that comes in, we have about 15 modules that sit on top of the platform that do various elements of application monitoring and infrastructure monitoring and management. And each of those starts to build that picture into a more complete view. So for example, we started off in network management. We've got a lot of great network data, but then we can start to add in some of our server and application monitor, for example, which starts to add in more information about applications and things like digital experience monitoring. Again, it all provides a slightly different view. So in terms of AppStack, actually, I'm just going to go over to So what we have here, and I'll probably drop back into this later, I talked about the application connection. So the way we actually do that is, there's a number of ways that we can obviously do things agentless, but we also have agents that will actually deploy to systems to really get a better understanding of what's going on. And we use nping, leveraging the capabilities of that particular open source technology to attach into drivers and get a better understanding of what processes are talking to what, as well as being able to understand what nodes are talking to what nodes. And so you can get a better understanding, or a little bit of an understanding of that from the application connections just in the top right-hand side. These are just showing what connections are taking place, in this case from an exchange perspective, to really understand what's there. Now, as we scroll down, obviously, again, there's a lot of information in this view. But then we start to get down, and this is actually our AppStack view. It's showing the relationship between, in this case, the application and the server to understand what's going on. In fact, I'm going to go and switch to a slightly different one to get a better understanding of how this can be used today.
Is this a real-time view of the data?
This is our online demo, which is built on a real-time view of the data, yes.
Normally, if I was running this in production, it would be real-time
yes.
and refreshing?
It will be, near real-time. We've actually added some new real-time widgets into the dashboard capabilities, so it will be polling on a periodic basis, and you can configure that. But as soon as the information becomes, is captured and available in the central system, it's available in your dashboard.
Bearing in mind there's a huge amount of data on that one screen.
Yes.
By the time I actually find what I want, something might have refreshed. So do I have the ability to, slider back a couple of refreshes so I can go back and see what changed where, because there might be correlations between one thing changing in one environment and one in another. And I might want to go back and say, oh, look, there's the point where that changed, and those two things are probably related.
No, that's a great question. So we have a couple of things that we're looking at in that perspective. We're looking from the Orion Maps perspective to see how can we kind of put some checkpoints along the way so you do have that sliding scale. That's not something that we have available today. What we do have is both change monitoring on the network side and on the server side, that you can understand what changes have taken place. So on the network side, we're looking at things like obviously configurations. We're looking at firmware. Our network configuration manager, and notice we use names that reflect what we can do, will enable the full life cycle of actually patching and backup, etc. From that perspective. On the server side, we have something called Server Configuration Monitor, which is more change monitoring, but it will look across things like the Windows registry, what Linux packages, so it supports Windows and Linux today. And it will look to understand what changes have taken place over time. Who made that change? What that change was? Was it a configuration in a data file or a web config file, for example? So, steering in that direction. But not quite a sliding scale.
What about freezing the data so that I get a refresh and I think, right, I want to hold that now until I've had a chance to have a look at everything? Can I do that?
Not particularly, no. It's more of a real-time, live, hey, here's the status of what's going on in your environment without that kind of active replay. But definitely we get that question from our customers, and it's an area that we're looking at across a number of the different modules.
Okay. So I have another question. What I'm seeing on the screen now looks, I would say, no offense, like something I would say on pretty much any kind of monitoring product.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of paints, a lot of stuff. And you introduced the presentation as, how you are doing data visualization. So is there something in the demo or which explains how SolarWinds is doing things differently? For example, lessons you've learned from your own product, your own past, or what you've seen from the competition and how you are, let's say, helping customers see something like opening the control panel, like seeing most of the things immediately instead of having to scroll down into all of the items.
Yeah, so I'm actually about to, like you said, there's a lot of information in here, and so one of the things is how we can continually simplify what's actually in front of the user, and that's one area that we're working towards with the mapping technology. So in fact, if I'm going to scroll down here, this is one particular SQL server that's having some issues.
Command plus it a bit. It's invisible. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where the app stack really starts to come in, is that, look, we have an application, so we have our database, and we know we have some challenges with it. And in fact, if I scroll back up, you can see from some of the areas, this is a common problem with databases today, is the storage on the back end. If you start to run out of storage or it starts to get slow for whatever reason, you're going to have applications issues at the database. So a lot of folks are going to be looking at things like the CPU, they're going to be blaming the database, and really it's, again, what is the correlation between the database and all the elements in the stack to really try and get an understanding of what's going on there. And that's where AppStack, we first came out with AppStack to just, again, provide a visual correlation of what's working from the application itself all the way down, in this case, to the storage arrays. Now you can kind of see from this that there is an issue down at the storage LUN. And so anyone who, again, from a familiarity with databases, the first thing I jump into would be a storage perspective. And then I'm going to jump into the actual storage array itself. Now, this gets more of a bottoms-up picture. So again, I can start with the seed element, which is my storage array, and work up. I can understand what volumes are dependent upon that storage array by hovering over those, and we'll get some pop-ups from that perspective. What virtualization, again, is dependent upon those storage arrays, all the way to the range of applications. So I came in from the Microsoft SQL Server to come down into this view, but what I'm looking at is a series of applications across the top. So some of them are in a green state, like Patch Manager. That's more of a batch type role anyway, but those that are more active, like SQL Server, Microsoft Exchange, that are relying on this particular storage array, that is something that obviously I want to figure out what's going on from that perspective. So I can look through, again, there's a fair bit of information down here, but right down over on the left, one of the challenges that I've seen is actually one of our disks is having some issues. And so I can, again, start to drill down into more information just to understand how is that impacting the overall system. But immediately, again, it's just helped shorten my time to understand where across the stack is the core issue for that database challenge.
Sacha, who built this dashboard that we're looking at? Is that out of the box, or did I build that as the operator?
You have so a number of these will come out of the box, but with this particular demo environment, we're looking to solve many different questions, and so it's probably overly complex compared to what you may deploy inside your environment. Clearly, you want to shoot for as simple as possible. And ideally, and we'll get to the maps in just a few moments, would be just to have that kind of map view up on the view.
Okay, I'll wait for the map view.
Yes, we're going to get there. So that's AppStack. Again, it's all about relationships. That's where we started after some of the initial network mapping.
So when I look at this dashboard, this is a traditional dashboard that I'm used to, and maybe we're getting there.
Yep.
But there's a lot of problems on the screen, but I don't see a lot of actionable data, right? And I think that's my biggest concern, and I hope that that's where we're headed.
Yes.
Because you just pointed out there's a bunch of application issues, there's whatever, and ultimately it looks like the problem is the disk, which is down at the bottom, left-hand side. There's no correlated data. So I'm just pointing out that so far I'm kind of like, I'm seeing a lot of the problems that I've lived with in operating. So.
Yeah. No, and again, it's about just this. The only point of this view is to understand where some of those issues may be going to help really start to dig down. It's definitely not saying, okay, here's the specific problem. It's giving you an idea to start to focus the effort in terms of understanding what's going on.
Okay.
We then came out with NetPath. So under our NetPath services, so NetPath really came about with the advent of SaaS services. Is really understanding, okay, how is the ability to get from point A to point B. I'm just going to bring up a quick example on this one, which is Office 365. And in fact, let's take it from our East data center. And let me just do a full screen as well, it may help you. So this is taken from a point of presence in our data center all the way into Office 365. So obviously a lot of organizations using Office 365, we expect Microsoft to keep things up and running, but if it's not running, is it Microsoft's fault or is it something in between? And this is really looking at all the hops and all the different communications vendors from point A to point B. I said it's like trace route on steroids because it uses more than just kind of standard network TCP monitoring. It's actually going in through HTTP and leveraging other capabilities to bring in the mix. So we can actually start to break this out. Let's just zoom back out.
Sorry, to understand better, is this only about networking?
No, we're going to get, so NetPath is about networking. AppStack is about applications down into infrastructure, and the Orion Maps will
So I could have the same visualization for the database. I mean, if I have a database problem and I want to monitor all the stack down to the storage system,
yes.
and I have a similar, because this is, way better than the previous dashboard. I mean,
yes.
If there is something red, I can understand immediately, well, this is red.
Right.
There is something wrong.
Well, this won't go red because it's a trace route. It'll just change. The state will change. So
well, it will
in the case of the internet, if one of those hops goes down, it'll route around it because it's the internet.
Well, it will route
but
around
anyway,
it, providing there's a route available.
Yeah.
If you have a sensor or a probe somewhere in the stack, then you can understand immediately what happens also in your stack from the application.
Right.
I mean, application database, storage, networking in the middle, VM or whatever you have.
So this looks pretty interesting. Is that a view that you can access immediately, or do you need to drill down through all the panels to get to this view? Because it's,
no, we tend to bookmark them. You can also add this view into your dashboard as well.
Okay.
This comes back to the earlier comment as to, hey, there's a lot of information being presented.
So the thing what I understand is the product is highly customizable. So you need to let's say do all your parameterization from the start, so that the people, the IT ops people working on it, see the right panels, I guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, typically our customers come in with a specific point problem, and then we expand the conversation from there. And really, with a lot of projects that our customers undertake, it's a case of, hey, I've got a particular problem I'm trying to solve for. So we'll start to pull that information and come up with better views like this. So this could be part of maybe a 4-pane dashboard. So some of our customers in their NOC or operations center will have something like this just to make sure, and they may have it for some of the key services as well to really understand, again, what's going on. I mean, the interesting thing about this is that when you get into Microsoft's area, which is over here, I mean, as you were pointing out, if there is an issue with a telecommunications provider between our origination and the actual destination, it will start to highlight that where possible based on the information it's received. But interesting, when you get into Microsoft, and again, this is Office 365, it's just interesting to see all the different routing and kind of backup failover capabilities they put in place.
Are you able somehow, let's say if you have mapped an application and you have all of the components of the application, so let's say all of the different servers which comprise of the application, the storage endpoints and so on. Are you able to show, for example, if you're seeing some latency somewhere, and are you then able, for example, to deep dive and see what's going on? For example, if it's a DB server and you have a failed disk, you will be able to see that there's some latency, on getting data from the storage, or if it's, I don't know, a cloud-based application, that there's something going on the network.
Yeah, that's what we're really trying to do with Orion Maps, which is kind of the next one after this next piece. So consider these as kind of foundational elements as part of where we've gotten to where we are today. They still provide a lot of value in terms of trying to get down. So again, even AppStack, although it's very basic, it's directional. And I'd say as we're starting to build a lot more of these capabilities and visualizations together, when we'll culminate with the Orion Maps in just a few, you'll start to see how you can start to pull in different elements into a view that you create yourself. And that's one of the things is that we don't necessarily want to just necessarily, we'll give you maps that we can create dynamically based upon what you select, but we're also giving you the power to actually create your own maps yourself, because, you know, it's like art. Not everyone likes something that I would create. You may want to go and create something slightly different yourself.
This is all running as SaaS, though, isn't it?
No, this is actually an on-premise deployed, or you can deploy it into virtualization as well. So this is connecting to a SaaS particular server. It could connect to any application anywhere, but we just use SaaS as a key example of why this came about.
Right, so how much of the GUI usage are you tracking? Because obviously we're talking about data visualization.
Right.
There could be bits in the GUI that people never use because either it's cumbersome, badly written, or they just don't need it, or whatever.
Yeah.
So how much of the data of their usage profile are you tracking to know what works well in the visualization and what doesn't work well?
Yeah, there are certain days when I miss SaaS software because that's a lot easier to track. We do have certain mechanisms that we ask if customers would like to opt in. So we have something called, we're using a third-party product to actually get more insight about what features people are using, how they're using them. And of course, you know, it's no replacement for actually having conversations with customers as well. You know, I mentioned the Slack community, but you know, we are very much customer-driven in terms of our roadmap and some of the changes and features that we do.
But how many installations would you say there are of this?
I don't have a specific number, but a significant.
Thousands, tens of thousands?
I'd say probably thousands.
So you could collect the data from many customers if you had it, and then see what works across.
That's a technology focus for certain companies.
Yeah.
So the ability to do that is actually an entire technology set.
Absolutely, but we're talking about data visualization today.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of thing I was hoping we would be we'd be talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, the challenge with what you're talking about is getting customers to opt in to providing us that information. And there's still a lot of, as I say, when you're running a SaaS service.
It's a SaaS solution, absolutely.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. So with our SaaS service, it's certainly a lot easier to instrument those to get that kind of information about usage patterns. In a product like Orion, where it tends to be installed, you know, on a VM or something like that, we still, you know, legal requirements have to, and again, no one likes to be snooped upon. So it's all about getting the permission of the customer to bring that in. But so we try that angle. We also, as I say, have to go back to the the very manual conversations with customers to get that data out as well. And just, usage and so on and so forth. But good points. In terms of the perf stack, so I'm just going to pop into one of our IIS applications. So I just drill into this. So perf stack came about the same time as NetPath. And so in this case, again, there's a lot of information, but there's a challenge with this particular web server. If I scroll all the way down, I've got, this is part of our digital experience monitoring. It should probably go at the top if I redesign this dashboard myself, but you can kind of see that it's been going up and down fairly regularly. So for that, this is where our perf stack product comes into the mix, performance analyzer. And this is where you can kind of get a top-down view, looking at metrics across a common time element. So you can see we've pulled in availability information, we've got some change information, current connections and anonymous users, but you can kind of start to see, at least again, there's a lot of information in here as to what you may want to extend in. And you can easily just add in new components by just going in and adding entities. So we can add some entity information, or there's other information from whether it's a particular server, but anyway, any metrics that we gather, you can pull into this mix. One of the interesting things, though, you'll notice down here is that we've noticed that there's a change through our server configuration monitor. You asked about what changes took place. So we'll show that from a time series perspective, but we can easily then start to scan in and actually look to understand what changes, whether that was the change that took place that caused this particular server to go down. Again, it's putting in some of that CPU and trying to look for causality from a visual perspective of what's going on.
And that configuration change came from like the agent-based?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the agent, we can install that on Windows and or Linux today, and it will just look for changes that take place on the system.
Yeah.
And it will actually identify, especially if it's a text file, again, who made that change and what change that was. This particular environment, let's see if it, so you can actually quickly understand it was a change in the web config, what it was triggered by on what machine, who made the change, and actually if you zip in, then you can start to see what the before and the after was in this particular case. So, the server went down as soon as someone changed the standard file from configuration to oops, I broke it. So again, it's directional information, but again, you've got the information at your fingertips as quickly as possible. So that's the baseline. What I'm excited about is really what we've been doing with this new technology that we've been releasing over the past couple of years called Orion Maps. And so I'm just going to go into a couple of views to help show that. I'm just going to come out. So I'm going to go pop into our Exchange view again. Again, a lot of information, but one of the things we've done with Orion Maps is we've created the ability to choose any node or application or server or network device and start to pull together a more dynamic app. And there's a number of ways we can do that, but I'm going to start with the one that you can actually access very quickly. So this is all dynamically generated. Now, the way we actually do this is there's always a question of how many nodes and information should you put in front of the user to be as informative as possible. So right now, this is Microsoft Exchange. Obviously, it's a fair bit of information, but what we're pulling together is things about, we'll take the seed element, namely, in this case, Exchange, and we'll start to pull and identify all the connections that is actually communicating with. And so we'll use information like topology information and application dependency monitoring. And we'll pull that all into the view. The thing that we don't do is we don't necessarily want to look at child objects. For example, on a network, on a switch, you're going to have a bunch of ports. You don't necessarily want to pull that information into. You can do that in the editor yourself. But immediately, and again, this is not necessarily the cleanest view, but we can start to pull things out. We have some, oops. I centralize on the screen. Oops. Try that again. So again, this is just what's being pulled together, and I've zoomed out so I can kind of see some of the core elements. I can see in terms of traffic information. If I go down in a little bit further, and I can see there's, for example, there's a complete packet loss. And so if I scroll down in there, I can see in this case, I'm getting 0 Exchange replication information between these two instances and 100% packet loss. So clearly there's something going on there. I mean, just the whole thing of this is, obviously there is a lot of red and yellow in this diagram, but if you zoom back out, you can kind of, again, see where some of the challenges are that allow you to start drilling in to get that level of information out of the system.
What determines the node layout that you've got there?
Say again? What
determines the node layout?
So there are 3 algorithms, and this is definitely an area that we're looking to get better at, because you can do a force directional, a hierarchical, or a grid. Now, that's definitely with a number of elements on it.
Less practical, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. What you can do, sorry, good.
No, go ahead and then.
Oh no, what we can do from here, we can actually open this map in and use it as a baseline and open it up in an editor and actually design it.
Can I just simply drag one of the?
Oh yeah.
The items and then.
Yeah. So
redraw manually. Okay.
Yes. So that's what I was just doing originally, but frankly, there are far too many nodes on here. So my next step would actually be to open it up in the editor, and then go ahead and clean it up, get it a lot more presentable and easy to read. But again, this is just part of the initial.
And if you do drag it like that, would it remember what my?
You would have to open it and save it. So this is kind of like a one-time view unless you save it for future use, and then you import it on your own dashboard. And I'm going to go through actually creating a better view in just a minute.
Okay.
So do you need to manually click down to all the components and see what's broken, or is the application actually telling you, I see 5 application errors, the storage is broken on all of them? It's probably a storage issue.
Well, so now you're getting into the realm of kind of where some of, automatic correlation to really automatically get down to a specific point. This is more directional information to say, look, these things are broken. we can help identify the relationship and where you need to start drilling down to get more specifics. Like what I showed earlier on with it was probably due to down the storage array. We don't quite have the thing to say this is the one thing you need to fix.
Yeah.
We're obviously leveraging the understanding that things are not operating as we would expect them across different layers of the IT stack, and that's really where this is to allow you to start to pull that information into one view.
Is that on the roadmap though?
It's definitely something that we're investigating right now. Yeah.
So I saw 3 different interfaces so far. I mean, are they 3 different products under a single dashboard? How does it work? Different icons, different way of presenting the information. I know that there are different issues that you're investigating, but actually, I also can get that if you have a large team with different, sub-teams doing stuff, okay, but, it's confusing, isn't it?
Well, again, we serve, we at SolarWinds have customers we have the IT generalist who does everything, all the way up to where you have the different element teams. And really, that's where a lot of our products have kind of evolved into discrete kind of capabilities like server configuration monitoring, network configuration monitoring, because the audience using those will be separate. Unless they're not, in which case it will add on to the information that's available that the customer can then drill down into. So it's like, there's a lot of power here. The whole goal is how do we make it more simple and more easy to use over time? And granted, in this kind of initial view, we get an understanding. It's showing us all the relationships and the mapping, but there's definitely opportunity to clean that up and make it look a lot simpler and get a better understanding of what's going on across whichever layer of the stack. So one of the examples I'm about to go into is where you can split into between the actual network infrastructure and the logical infrastructure. So you have a network management team and then you have a virtualization management team. They can see from each of their respective angles what's going on. So in fact, let me just drop into our other system. Okay, so let me just show you a few examples before I go any further, just to show you what is possible with what we have in the mix. Actually, I'm going to go back up to the top. So I showed a couple of these at the very outset, but again, the question is how high level or how in depth do you as the user really want to create a map, and what information do you want to pull into it? So this is a very simplistic. We've just taken a background image of a campus and started to pull in various informations like, it could be various data centers, various servers across that campus, so that, again, we can probably work on the background image to make it less bold. But you can kind of start to see, that we should take the parking out, but the dependencies, but actually starting to highlight some of those things. Yeah, what is P? So go back into here. Some of the other ways that we're using it is just as, this is a campus. This was actually based on one of our customers' environments. So they sent us a network map, and our product team actually went out to create that same view using the new Orion Maps.
So that raises a question which I was about to say. Are you able to help your customers visualize their data? For example, if they tell you we have this kind of infrastructure, is that something that you can do for them, or you're just going to tell them, yeah, go look at the documentation?
We'll do both angles. So we provide as much self-service through online training, through our training programs. There's obviously the THWAC community, so self-service and self-help. We've got documentation from here to the end of the world. But we also have not professional service, but we do have a customer success and support team that can help customers be more successful in their own environment. And as I said, this was we're obviously continuing to learn at the same time. And so if a customer is willing to have a conversation with us, then and see how we can improve our products to help them, then clearly that's going to be a win-win. And so this was one of those examples where it's like, okay, we were at the early stages of Orion Maps, and they would say, okay, just create this. And so Jeff Blank, who's our PM for this, came in and said, yeah, okay, here's what I created with the tools as it is today. And they were actually very pleased with this particular diagram.
So beyond that, is there a kind of, I don't know if methodology is the right word, but are there some kind of templates somehow you're offering, for example, to monitor certain types of standardized applications or services, or for example, even infrastructure, for instance, are you able to provide some standard maps? Because if the customer needs to do everything on their own, it can get quite complex. Or people are using monitoring tools to battle issues they're having, and they not necessarily always have the time to fiddle, let's say, with customizing things.
Right. So that comes back into more of that dynamic map element that we've saw on every element at whatever layer of the stack. We have that ability to map it at that point in time. Now, clearly, the one in Exchange was a pretty complex one, but then you have the ability to open up that in the editor, modify it to the view that you want, and take it from there. So yeah, we help provide the building templates, but again, the problem with the mapping is that no two environments are going to be the same. We can look at the applications, some application metrics, and so we do have application templates or monitoring templates within this particular platform that will look at certain applications that I'd say more of the packaged applications that you can get today. And then we can also do some elements of custom application monitoring as well, and with our other tools as well. But coming up with a standard map that will fit everyone's needs, I think it's just more a case of coming out with examples, but also providing that ability to create that initial map so that you can take it from that standpoint onwards.
There's no event correlation here. Like if I'm feeding logs into SolarWinds from a variety of sources, you're not putting those together and helping me come up with an actionable item, tying these back to maps, or are you?
We're doing it in certain ways. In sense, we'll provide some recommendations, again, depending upon what exactly is going on in the environment. So we'll provide things like recommendations at the virtualization tier. Hey, there's too much memory allocated to this particular device. Hey, you're trying to run too much on a small box. Those kind of recommendations will pop up. We will also have some degree of alerting and correlation from that standpoint, but a lot of the, we don't have kind of the full statistical correlation. We're starting to build that in. And so if any of you attended the session with, I think it was back in Austin, where we talked about our DPA product, and we had some kind of machine learning and anomaly detection from that standpoint. We're taking those learnings and starting to look at how we can build those into the rest of the products in the portfolio to provide more of what you're asking about right now.
I think like in the AppStack demo you had earlier, that the ability to drill down from database error, drilling down to a drive error is awesome if you have time to go and hover over everything and dig down.
Right.
What would be fantastic is if you were able to make those correlations down to what I see in my dashboard is, hey, you have a drive error that's causing these bunch of errors, right?
Right.
Really, that's what I want in my ideal world. Right under 6 unicorns. That's the root cause analysis I want to see. Is I really want that's my root cause. Fix that, and these 12 other errors disappear.
Right.
And so that's what I'd love, is that kind of root cause.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's what everyone is definitely striving for.
You have it done by tea time?
Sorry?
Have it done by tea time?
Yes, absolutely. Which year? No, that's definitely the nirvana that anything in IT operations is looking for, even in the AIOps space.
Yeah.
Even that, there's certain advancements going across the industry, for sure. Across our competitors and vendors in the space. But it's definitely not quite, and there's no silver bullet per se, because again, whether you may not have the skills and the expertise in-house, or the technology is kind of still evolving to try and get to that, hey, here's the one thing to fix that will correlate across the board. So where our strength comes in is really, again, understanding the relationships between A and B that weren't necessarily totally visible before. Because they may exhibit themselves as an error message in your SQL database or somewhere else. But even if you look at some of the more advanced and more popular log management products, in many cases you still have to write the questions in order to be able to get the answers out yourself.
Yeah, I think you're close in as much as you've got all the tiers and they're all they're joined up. You've got the hierarchy there.
Right.
and I'm not trying to trivialize.
Oh, no.
The actual problem of making that connection and generating the root cause is absolutely non-trivial.
Yes.
I just don't know if there's some way to say, when you look at something to say, okay, let me eliminate all of the green stuff below that and say, okay, show me all the bad stuff that's below this in the tree almost, so I can at least hone in on all the bad stuff quickly and not have to say, okay, let me open this page and now let me scan. Where we started off the presentation was, here's a big table of data. And I kind of feel like that's what I have to look at again. Okay, I've put some color coding, but I'm still going to the next dashboard to scan for red, yellow, green.
Right.
If I'm colorblind, by the way, how am I doing?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I'm colorblind and I struggle with a lot of these dashboards.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's another area of investigation that we have, as well as many other folks across the industry, where things like color blindness and other kind of challenges from that standpoint. The federal space, actually not just in the US but worldwide, there's some better standards and guidance on how to do that today.
Yeah, so anything that can help kind of filter out down to, okay, show me the stuff I might want to look at. The stuff that we're hovering, anything I have to hover over, every time I have to sit, put the mouse over, wait a second for the hover to come up.
Right.
That blows my mind that I have to waste the time doing that. It's like if there's any way to bring that straight up as... And if there's nothing to look at on there, everything's clean and green in that hover text, tell me not to look at it. There's nothing to see here.
Oh, yeah.
Move on.
No.
Right? It's so...
Colors aside, I mean, that's really the whole goal, is to say, okay, here are the issues that are popping up, whether it's a response time, whether it's a health issue, or otherwise. But I mean, as I said, really the step that we've taken is to help identify those things and the relationships between them, and then the communications. But point taken.
I can't believe you guys had never thought of any of this before now.
Yeah, we're still working on it.
Well, I think the landscape's becoming more difficult, right? As we talk about controller-based systems that have a more holistic view of the network, we're getting used to the idea that that type of information is available to us in a lot of different places where we do have relationship mapping only because they're closed systems. It's a challenge for you guys because you guys are coming from the outside of those systems. How do you do? How do you build those dependency mappings the way that a closed controller-based system will? But it's the reality of the environment today is that that's the data we're getting elsewhere. And so if I'm having to look at 4 different dashboards, not within your system, but if I'm having to look at my controller-based dashboard and then get insights from you, that's just a challenge, right?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges across the people that we speak to is really tool proliferation, and I think that kind of bleeds into what you're saying, or blends into what you're saying, is that in the same way that I was talking about earlier on, I would have to go to multiple tables of data and kind of scroll through those. That's one area that we do provide, or we look to provide value, is pulling all the information into one place so we can do those normalizations, those kind of help with visual correlations, and start to drill down across any level of detail. Now, granted, yes, you still have to drill down to get some of the more specifics, even down to the log layer. If you want to look at that, that's available within this product as well. But ideally, again, trying to get that understanding of those relationships without something like this can be extremely challenging, and that's really where a lot of our customers come to us for.
What happens when some of your customers are moving up to cloud? I don't know if you've touched on it or not, but if I'm using PaaS in Azure or AWS, is there some of that reflected in here?
Yeah. One of our things is we've been actually hybrid for a number of years now, in the sense of being able to monitor hybrid environments. So whether you're on premises in Azure or AWS, in fact, we just did a big story and we were at MS Ignite talking about some of those capabilities, is that inside this particular product or set of products, we have monitoring templates for different Azure PaaS services. We have some monitoring templates for Office 365, as well as other services beyond that. We have a whole another set of products which are actually SaaS-based, which are more modern application monitoring, or fit into the today version of APM. It's a SaaS delivered. It's designed to do things like distributed transaction tracing. Really, the kind of users of that, this tends to be an infrastructure and operations type user. The other type of user tends to be more of an application developer. But we are finding that a lot more, those groups that used to not talk to each other are now actually talking a lot more to figure out, okay, what are the tools that we can bring in so that we can each have our respective conversations from that stuff.
You just said distributed transaction tracing, so that's
That's not in this particular product. That's in one of our other products called AppOps.
Quick question. So you have all these products, different families, different kind of users.
Yes.
How do you sell to them? I mean, do you sell a single infrastructure, monitoring infrastructure, and then everybody buys, his plugin or his product, and or are they totally different products at the end of the day?
It comes down to who you're talking to for what problem. So if you're going to start with a particular, hey, I have a particular problem that I'm trying to solve, you may not be talking to an IT decision maker who may have more scope of what they're trying to accomplish. So it's really a tailored conversation from that standpoint. So I just want to cover some of the things that we can. So this is I'm going to create a new map. Here's my canvas. We've got entities on the left-hand side. One of the things we can do, so we've got nodes. We've got all different types of entities in this mix. So I'm going to choose nodes. One of the things I can actually filter on to choose the elements that I want to pull into the mix. Now, a lot of our customers actually go and tag their particular solutions. So in this case, I have the ability to go in and I'm going to look for comments. And there's this thing called comments that I'm going to add to selected properties. Again, it's just another way to help me filter what I want to pull into the mix. And so I'm going to pull in all the elements in my particular, I've called it demo environment, which is going to really cut down what I have here. Now, one of the things that we changed pretty quickly in the recent release is it used to be you can only drag and drop one of these at a time. That's obviously pretty painful, but now I can do individual selection, or I can do a select everything and then pull it into the mix. And you'll immediately see that where relationships exist between those different nodes, that starts to actually pull those together. So you can kind of see from here, this is more of an infrastructure node, but I also have an ESX host sitting over there. So I'm going to move it over to the right. Now, one of the other things I'm going to do next is just say, okay, let's find out what relationships are out in the mix. So I'm going to show related entities, or I can show connected entities. Connected is where we actually know there's a connection, whether through topology or application discovery, and pull that in. So what I can do is say, okay, let's show all the connected entities. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Not connected, I meant related. And it's just pulling that all from the database. And I'm going to filter this down to nodes. And I can see I've got a vCenter and two domain controllers out in the mix. So I'm going to pull those down into the view. And one of the nice things I've got is I've got the ability to zoom out. I can recenter the whole diagram. So again, I can start to pull things in a slightly different direction. The other thing I may want to pull into the mix is understand what data center. Virtual data centers. So I can pull that over here. And data stores. I'm going to pull out the one data store. And again, starting to show all the relationships between what I have on my actual infrastructure on the left and what I have in my virtual infrastructure on the right. And again, starting to pull. And then I can also pull virtual machines into the mix. Now, one thing here is that there may be a node or there may be a virtual machine. So again, this is more of a design thing. We don't stop the customer from kind of duplicating, for want of a word. So you can have obviously a virtual guest and the virtual machine, which may have a similar name. So in this case, I'm just going to pull out some of these elements to pull them into my diagram. So you'll see the DCs down there. It's no point in having them both in the mix. And again, I can just modify this to be a bit more clear. The other thing is I can also look at things like group information. So you see all the different types. I can do embedded maps. But again, it's just allowing the user to create the objects that they want to in this particular view. The other thing that's very powerful that we put in is just the ability not to automatically detect connections, because sometimes there may be a server or system out there that we don't actually see a connection to. Maybe there's an issue with the SNMP, or maybe that's gone. There's an issue with actually polling a particular. For example, a new firmware update has come out that we've lost that ability to get that information. So what we can start to do then is pull in other information. Let's see if we can find a few other nodes. Pull in this BGP. Where did it Actually, I'm not going to do that one. Let's choose another one. Let's do this one over here. And what I can do there is, let's just say there should be a connection between these two. I can actually manually define that connection up here. So I can go in and I can configure what I want to monitor from an egress and an ingress standpoint. So I'm just going to pick a couple of random, that's probably a bad one. Oh, didn't mean to do that.
Nope, not allowed.
Keep me signed in. Okay, what happened? Okay, something happened. We'll just choose this one. And we'll choose another port on the other one. And we can create a manual connection. That's just going to pop up in just a moment. So, clearly, if we know that connection should be there and it's not, then we can actually define it ourselves. Interestingly enough, we can also pull in images into the mix. So, we talked about cloud and environments from that standpoint. At a network layer, we are working on ability to plug in better to things like Azure and so on and so forth. But if we have an edge device, let's say it's this one, again, in the same way, I can create a connection between these two elements. And so what I can do is I can say, okay, let's pick the same port. Ignore the fact that I'm just going to find this cure. And I'm going to pick the same port on this as well. And what I can do in this case is basically using the same port, measure the egress and the ingress in order to determine how much traffic is going to and from between my two locations. And you'll see that pop up on there. And then we can do some other fun things, such as just pulling in some different backgrounds. I want to move this over. We can resize that. Pull in another one. And we can also create some images. And so these are just basic graphics. We support JPEGs, SVGs. I'll make that a little bit smaller. That's my network, even though it's hard to read. And then I've got my virtual infrastructure on the right-hand side. But again, I'm just creating a relatively simplistic view. Again, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but based on what you actually want to pull in. So we've got all these elements we're gathering information on. Where there is relationship information, we'll certainly gather that. But then I can save this. Let's call it Sacha temp. And then I can go back up to my dashboard area. Again, talking about customizations earlier on, put in my customized page. In this case, I'm going to add in a new map. Add widget. Map. Done adding widgets, and then I can just actually choose any of the maps that are available in my portfolio. And editing, choose map. And straight away, that's available on my screen and on my dashboard. So that, in a nutshell, is just how we've started to develop our Orion Maps and kind of make it a lot simpler. And obviously, one of the challenges we had with the current version of Network Atlas is that they don't scale very well. The ones about this that you create in whatever way you want to do, they will actually scale out, scale in, depending on how you view that on the dashboard, and automatically centralize themselves on that view. So that's kind of where we are today, and some of the other capabilities that we've pulled in the mix. Okay. I think we're about out of time, but ultimately, yeah, it's all about putting more visualization power in the hands of end users, trying to take that complex set of data and put it into those map views, such as what we have here, to really understand and help customers really understand what's going on in that environment.